My honor to introduce and everybody join us in giving a big welcome to Tom Steyer. Hey guys. Happy New Year. Wow, big year. Let me just start by saying that I did not show up alone. I brought the heavy artillery. Yes. My wife, Kat Taylor, is sitting right there. Let me say that we have been married for almost 34 years, and we have 4 kids, 2 of whom are working on quit their jobs to work on the campaign. But Catherine has always been a full partner for me in the things that we've done. We started a bank, a community bank, dedicated to economic justice, environmental sustainability, and supporting businesses owned by women and people of color about 12 to 14 years ago, and Kat's been the CEO of that bank. So she's actually, she's the brains of the operation. So let me just say, it is a happy new year. This is a gigantic year for the people of Iowa and the people of the United States of America. It's gigantic. And so what I'd like to do tonight is I'd like to have as much as possible a conversation with the people in this room and answer as many of your questions as I can and as you can stand to stick around for. So what I'd like to do is start by giving you just a short explanation of why I'm running for president, why I think I can win, what I think is at stake in this race, and hopefully that will be the spur for a long conversation. Everything is what's at stake. I know it. So I'm running for a simple reason. I think the government is broken in Washington, D.C. I think it's been purchased by corporations. I don't think it's even trying to serve the people of the United States of America. And so, as Scott so kindly said about me, I have spent 10 years putting together coalitions of American citizens like the people in this room to take on unchecked corporate power. And for 10 years, together, we've been beating them. We've had, in 26 states, you can put things on the ballot and run propositions that become laws if enough people vote for them. So we've been in fights with oil companies and beat them. We've been in fights with tobacco companies who've won 17 times in a row and beat them. We've beat utilities in terms of pushing clean energy rules on them when they didn't want it. We've taken on drug companies and beaten them. For 10 years, the organized people of the United States have shown that we can beat corporations when we get together. And so when I think the other thing that Scott referenced is I started something called Next Gen America, which is one of the largest grassroots organizations in the United States. In 2018, we got 38 Republican congressional districts. We went in to organize young people, including 2 in Iowa. We've been organizing, Next Gen has been organizing in Iowa since the beginning of 2014. This is going to be our 7th year in Iowa. 38 Republican districts, organizing young people. The young generation in America is the biggest generation in American history. It's the most diverse generation in American history. It's the most progressive generation in America, and young people voted half the rate of other American citizens. We went into 38 Republican districts. We more than doubled the turnout of people under 30. 33 districts flipped to Democratic in 2018. And let me say, why does that matter in 2020, other than the fact that we have a Democratic Congress and the Democrats, that we have back an actual branch of government? What does that say? It says something really different about what Democrats should be doing to win this year. It's saying the way that we win is not by convincing the 2% of people who are, moderate Republicans, independents, who can't decide which way to vote, by saying we're just like Republicans, only a little bit nicer. We're not. We're completely different from Republicans. We have a completely different plan. We think about people completely differently. So actually the way that we're going to win in 2020 is to tell the truth and go to the 25 to 50% of Americans who don't vote at all because they think the system is broken, and tell them, I swear to God, we're going to help you. That's how we're going to win in 2020. We can't compromise with people who deny science. We can't compromise on them. We can't compromise on people who are racist, with people who are racist. We'll be part racist with you? No, we're not going to. What we've seen, you guys live in a state where you've seen this, and I've been traveling the state since the beginning of 2014. There's a very straightforward Republican program, which Mr. Trump has followed, and it's cut taxes on the richest Americans and the biggest corporations, cut education spending, K through 12 and higher ed, go after unions, try to stop organized labor and keep wages down, allow as much pollution as people want, cut healthcare. It's a 5-part economic plan that helps corporations and rich people and goes absolutely on the attack against the American people. So what we have to do, that's what I'm saying. I've spent 10 years taking on those corporations and beating them. And we're not going to get any of those policies, the progressive policies that everyone in this room wants. Affordable health care is a right for every American.
Yes.
We all want it. Everybody in this room, it's a right for American citizens. Quality public education from pre-K through college.
Yes.
It's a right. We don't have it. Clean air and clean water is a right. But nobody gets to poison you and your family so they can make more money.
Nobody.
No. It's a, we have a right to it. Honestly, a living wage. In this country, there has been a 40-year war on unions, on organized labor, and by extension, on working people across this country. And if you look at the numbers, you can see this country's grown since 1980. It has. But all the increase in income has gone to the richest people and the biggest corporations. It's astonishing that it's happened to such a degree for 40 years. Americans have a right to a living wage. One job pays for it. And I would say, look, I went back and looked. If you took the minimum wage in 1980 when Ronald Reagan was elected, and just inflation adjusted it till today, you know, the minimum wage in the United States is $7.25. If you inflation adjusted the 1980 minimum wage, so no increase in buying power, just really the same wage but in today's dollars, it's $11. If you include the increase in productivity of American workers, thinking that, okay, if working people are more productive, people who own the business get half, working people get half. If you just do that, which is what's happened traditionally in America, as you get more productive as a person, you get to keep half of it. The minimum wage would be $22 an hour. That's actually where we should be, $22. And think about what that would mean in the United States of America if actually the money had been shared fairly over the last 40 years and what we could afford and how different life would be. So we are going to have to take back the government. Really, these corporations have bought it and it's working perfectly for them. But we're going to have to take it back, and we're going to have to make structural changes so that the people of the United States actually have control again of by and for the people. And that's the idea of democracy, of by and for the people, not of by and for corporations. So that's why I talk about term limits. It's like 12 years for Congress and senators. And I mean, I do joke about it. I say 6 words to convince you on term limits: Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, Chuck Grassley. I know, it is true. But the real point is, if we want real change, we need new and different people in charge. That's really what term limits are. And let me also say, I believe, look, this Congress is broken. All of the problems we're talking about have been there for decades. And there's been no action because somebody is making a lot of money out of there being no action and the status quo. If you think about healthcare, we pay twice as much as for healthcare as anyone else in the world. And why is that true? Well, I can tell you, it's great for drug companies, it's great for insurance companies, and it's great for private hospitals. So when you think about why is it true, it's like, well, if they own the government, it's actually working perfectly for them. So I want to have the people of the United States have a right to pass our own laws. That if the Congress won't pass something, and I always use the example of mandatory background checks on gun purchases. Almost everybody in the United States, 90% of Americans, want mandatory background checks on gun purchases. As many Republicans as Democrats. 70% of NRA members want mandatory background checks on gun purchases. But we don't have them, and it's not even on the table, because the NRA is actually controlled by gun manufacturers, and they really like to sell guns to whoever will pay. And so we don't have mandatory background checks. If we had the ability to have a national referendum, we would have background checks on guns in about a week. That's why I'm for pushing power to the people, because I believe the people in this room and the people across this country are where the wisdom and the compassion and the bravery are in the United States of America, not in Washington. Okay, 2 more quick points, and then I'd like to open up to questions. One is, you should know, I'm the only person in this race who will say that climate is my #1 priority. And let me say, specifically, I feel I have to say that because of where we are, what the science says, that we're at risk. I came to Council Bluffs back in, I think, October, to kind of look and see what the flooding had looked like this year, to talk to some people who've been flooded out, to understand what had happened over the last decade. And so, Iowa is not immune to climate change. Everybody in the country, but specifically people, I mean, I know nothing is simple and there are different things going on in terms of the flooding here. But as a country, we don't have a choice but to make it our #1 priority. I would declare a state of emergency on day 1, use the emergency power of the presidency. But I want to make a few quick points. One is, our climate plan is called a justice-based climate plan. Because what I've found over 12 years of fighting on climate is, you start in communities where it's unsafe to drink the water that comes out of the tap, and it's unsafe to breathe the air without getting asthma, and they understand that something has to change right now. Climate justice, environmental justice. And that's, our plan is a justice-based plan. But the second thing I want to say is this. Our plan creates millions and millions of good-paying union jobs across every part of America. Someone looked at our plan from the outside this week and said, under this plan, we will have the highest percentage of union participation in the United States since 1945. This is the biggest jobs program. If you think about it, we have to rebuild this country. Literally, think about it. We have to rebuild buildings. We have to rebuild the grid. This is a state that gets 40% of its energy from big wind turbines. We're going to have to do things like that all over the country, and someone's going to get paid to do it at a good union wage. This is going to rebuild, literally, this country on an accelerated basis and put millions of people to work. And we're going to go into the rural parts of this country. We're going to have to sequester carbon. And we're not doing that in downtown Chicago or downtown Des Moines or New York City. We're going to do it in the big open spaces, which means we're going to be partnering with farmers. We're going to be partnering with rural America to make sure we understand with them how to do it and then paying people there to do it. And the last thing is, we're going to have to lead the world. This is a global problem. Only America has the moral, economic, financial, technological, commercial leadership to change this. So there is no second choice to America in terms of making this happen in the world. And you can see with Mr. Trump and what's been happening that if there is no American leadership, this problem will definitely get away from us. But let me talk about that for 1 second, which is this. It is impossible to travel around this country, which I've been doing full-time for 7 years, without understanding that at some level we've lost a sense of what it means to be an American. You know, there was a study last week that came out and said for the 3rd year in a row, life expectancy went down in the United States. And if you look at the reasons, 3 of the 4 reasons were alcoholism, opioids, and suicide. Now those are 3 things that imply people are really wondering what to do about their lives. They're either self-medicating or they really are worried about the future. And I think we've lost a sense of what we're trying to accomplish together, which doesn't surprise me, given our president and the fact that he has no values, honestly. But if you think about this country, and you think about us doing what I'm talking about, which is saying priority 1 is going to be rebuild the country, lead the world, stop the climate crisis, save the world, that is a reason for every person in this room, but every person across this country to get up in the morning and have meaning in their life. That is the United States doing what we were created to do, which is be the beacon of freedom, justice, equality in the world. That's exactly what I think it means to be an American. People say climate's gloomy. Climate is a reason to get up in the morning with joy and purpose. And the last thing I want to say is this about Mr. Trump. We all know, and I think Democrats are getting extremely nervous about the idea that we have to beat Mr. Trump. And he's a talented demagogue. He's a very talented demagogue. He didn't just beat the most prepared presidential candidate ever, Hillary Clinton, who's a very smart, very talented person. He also beat 16 conventional Republicans in the primaries like a drum. And we know how he's going to run. You know, about 2 weeks ago, he was talking to the American-Israeli Conference. So these are American citizens. And he said, you don't like me, and I don't like you, but you're all going to vote for me, because if the Democrats get in, they're going to destroy the economy in about 15 minutes. That is what he's going to say to run. That is his campaign. I would modify it slightly. What he's really going to say is, I'm a criminal. I hate 80% of you. You know that. Your mother would never let me come to dinner and sit down at the table. My mother would never have let him sit down at our dining table, ever. But you're all going to vote for me because the Democrats are socialists who don't know anything about the economy. And they're going to promise you a whole bunch of things, but they're going to tank this economy. And you can't make it without me. Honestly, that's what he's going to say. And for us to beat him, we're going to have someone who can look him in the eye and say, you know, honestly, baloney. You're a fake. You were a fake business person. You played a business person on a reality TV show. You actually were a failed business person. And you're a terrible steward of the American economy. I mean, the 2 things that he's done are the biggest tax giveaway to rich people and corporations in American history. And you know that that is, in the long term, a huge attack on 90% of Americans, because they're going to tell us all, there's no money for your education. There's no money, it isn't. There's no money for your health care. There's, you know, they are going to take it out of American citizens. And then he's got his trade war, which is a specifically terrible action against American workers, but really terrible for American farmers and people in Iowa specifically. I would end the trade war on the first day of my presidency. I would just undo everything he did. It's failed. It's hurt Americans. There's no reason to continue in what is a straight up mistake. So I believe, I built a business from scratch. I didn't inherit any money from my parents. I have no problem looking him in the eye and saying, baloney. You know, really, what you're saying is baloney. What you've created is a very successful economy for the richest people and the biggest corporations. But you are screwing over Americans left, right, and center, and you intend to continue to do it, all the while claiming you're doing a great job. That's why I believe I can take him down as someone with the expertise and experience of 30 years in the private sector, knowing what it actually takes to create a prosperous country, which is prosperous people, is making the people of the United States individually prosper by supporting them through education, by investing in their success, by investing in your success. That's actually how you have a productive, prosperous country, is by the people of the country being productive and prosperous with the support of their government. That's how, if you look around the world, all the countries that truly prosper do that. And we've chosen something completely different, which is to throw the money at the richest people and hope that they share it. And we have 40 years of proof to say they don't. So that's exactly why I'm running for president. So I would love your hardest possible questions on January 1st.
Going now?
Yeah.
Oh, hey. So, hey, you're a billionaire, which is
Introduce
great.
yourself.
My name's Justin. Hi, Justin. You're a billionaire, which is good because Trump is not. Would you talk about income inequality and universal pre-K to, I think, college, you said. Would you support a wealth tax to the effect of Senator Warren's 50 cents every $50 million of that?
So Justin, just so you know,
Yes.
I proposed a wealth tax
Right.
over a year ago.
Right. And what was
It probably 14 months ago, 15 months ago, long before Senator Warren,
right?
for the reason that you said,
Right.
which is this. The growing income inequality over the last 40 years is extremely unjust. It's very un-American. It's bad for our economy. It's terrible for Americans. But the wealth inequality, the inequality of money, is much worse. And so a wealth tax is a way of both raising money that we need for programs, but also at some level redressing what has been a redistribution of wealth to the richest Americans over the last 40 years. So I've been for a wealth tax for and I've said, if you want to lead the Democratic Party in 2020, particularly, and I've said this specifically to Mike Bloomberg, if you want to represent fairness and equality in this country, you have to be for a wealth tax. And there's different, mine is different from Elizabeth Warren's. It starts a little lower. It has different gradations. But the basic point is this: something has gone wrong in our society. It really has. And one of the things that's true is, I'm also, let me say this, I'm for redressing all of the income tax giveaways to the richest Americans and the biggest corporations. I am also believe that Americans should pay the same rate of tax on passive investment income as they do on earned income. I don't understand why somebody who gets X thousands of dollars from an investment pays a different rate than somebody who goes to work and earns X thousands of dollars. It seems like it's income to me. And if we did that, which I have proposed, we could give a 10% income tax break to 95% of Americans. If we just accepted passive investment income the same way we do earned income, 95% of Americans could get a 10% tax break, and I proposed it. Sure, go ahead.
So I'll give you a little bit of a challenging question, Dustin.
What's your name, by the way?
Sidoris,
What's your name?
Dustin Sidoris. So I'm from Omaha, just across the river.
Okay.
So in Nebraska, we had introduced term limits at our state level. Of course, we're a unicameral system, so that means only our senators stay for so long. We don't have Congress people in the House. What we've learned as far as a term limit issue is what happens is your Congress people or your representatives don't know enough about the subjects to write the regulation because they haven't had enough time in office to learn about whatever they're writing. So the problem then becomes, where do they go to get information on how to regulate businesses? Because they don't have enough time. They then have to go to those industries, and they're asking the industries, help us regulate you. So when we talk about term limits, when I was previously running, that was something that I had looked into. I'll get your staff a paper about why I decided against that. Because what happens is, when you're looking for resources to write legislation, is you don't know enough about the industry, so you go to the industry. So how, at an executive level, despite it being completely different in a congressional, how would you assist Congress in understanding that legislation without that memory and knowledge?
So just so you know, we went through the exact same thing in California, and what we ended up doing was lengthening how long people got to stay. Because I think there's a tension. I think you make a good point, and I think I've recognized it, and in fact, I actually observed what you saw in real time about 10 years ago.
Right.
But let me say, there's a tension between making sure that there is new blood and new ideas.
Oh, yeah.
And the idea that if there's too short a tenure, that people don't have enough institutional knowledge together
Correct.
to do their job professionally.
Right.
So to me, the tension is to have it be long enough so people can be efficient, but not a lifetime appointment, so they in effect become the possessions
Right.
of corporations.
Right.
And that's what I've tried to do. So it's a question of getting the time right.
Yeah.
And that's what I've tried to do.
So
But it's a
you were
good
thinking
point.
12 years is about what?
I think so.
Okay.
Ma'am,
I
and
totally,
someone will bring you a,
I'm Elaine Wells, and I'm from Omaha.
Elaine.
I saw you when you were here last summer, or 2 summers ago. I totally agree that climate change is the most important issue, not only for the United States, but for everyone in the world. But I think close second is healthcare. That's the thing that is going to affect most people in the United States. And so I'm wondering for specific ideas, how you're going to lower the cost of healthcare, how you're going to provide it to most people, and sell it to the American public.
So let's take a step back, because I think you did a good job of kind of defining what we need to accomplish in broad strokes, which is, I think that affordable healthcare is a right for every single American. And in order to provide that right, we also need, the federal government needs to dramatically drop the price of healthcare. Because what we really have is a healthcare pricing problem and a healthcare availability problem. And so the question is, how can you, and it's a fair question, how can we best accomplish those two broad goals? And I mean, gosh, I've listened to this debate, and I'm sure that everybody in Iowa is listening to this debate even more than I have, between Medicare for all and a public option where you can sign up for Medicare on the Affordable Care Act, through the Affordable Care Act. Just so you know, I'm one of the people who thinks that a public option accomplishes the two goals. It gives people an absolute right to health care, and it also lets the federal government have this huge negotiating power to attack the pricing across the board. So what would that look like? Look, obviously, the easiest way to see how we're getting ripped off in healthcare is to see what we pay for drugs versus other countries pay for the exact same drugs. You know, we pay 10 times as much for insulin as Canadians pay. And then there was a law saying it's illegal to drive to Canada to buy your drugs, which only a drug company could have written that law. I mean, if you think about it. So how could, insulin was invented in 1930. This is not a new drug. The drug companies are always saying, you know, we need the money to invent new drugs. Insulin has been around almost 100 years. So what's happened is every other country in the world negotiates drug prices on behalf of their citizens except ours. That makes no sense. There is a series of ways that we should be negotiating drug prices. We have also seen the private hospitals do a series of what I consider anti-competitive, monopolistic practices so they can control markets and jack up prices on sick people. Yeah, and the federal government needs to push back on that really hard. You know, there is a sense in the United States, as a result of Ronald Reagan, that markets are efficient that corporations are efficient and that they keep costs down. Let me say, as someone who worked in the private sector for 30 years, who went to Stanford Business School, that's utter baloney. You know, that's what they teach you in the first year of economics. But actually, this is a system where the corporations have one customer, and their whole job is to make the prices be as high as possible, as opposed to provide the best service at the lowest prices, which they teach you in Econ 101. So really here, we need the government to very aggressively push down price on behalf of American citizens and use the buying power. I want to say, there are 2 things you should know about me, and you can ask Kat Taylor if these are true. I am really competitive. Really competitive. I don't like people taking advantage of me, and I don't like people taking advantage of the people who I perceive as my teammates. And as far as I'm concerned, the American people are my teammates. And I don't like it. And the other thing is, I spent 30 years in business pushing back on what I consider rip-off artists. And I don't like rip-off artists. So I've had a lot of experience of negotiation. And what's gone on is unconscionable. Because basically, these guys have been negotiating with people who really wanted them to get high prices. Because there's a big relationship here. I mean, I know people, I am financing my own campaign. And I know people ask me about that a lot. But let me tell you one thing about that. I don't owe anyone anything. If there's a negotiation with a drug company, I promise you, I have one interest: the lowest prices for American citizens in the American government. So this is going to be a question of the government pushing back really hard and not believing when people say all the things they're going to say about how terrible it is that we pay the same prices as everybody else in the world. They're going to explain that's the end of the world, and it's not. And so we're going to have to, we need lower prices so that we can pay less, but also get more and better health care. When we're paying lower prices for this, that means there's more money available for all the other services that people can't afford right now. That's the other part of this that people don't concentrate on.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so a retired insurance executive told me that the average cost of administration for insurance companies is 30%. The average cost of administration for Medicare is 3%.
Okay, so I heard that 20 and 2, but that's why let me just say this. Why am I for a public option? The public option gives people a choice. Look, Kat and I were with people from the International Brotherhood of Electric Workers who spent decades fighting for the best health care. If we get a public option that's cheaper and better, then they can go to their employers and say, don't pay my health care, give me the money, I'll buy my own health care on the public option. And so we leave choice for the 160 million people. I think that's a big deal personally. I hate people telling me about my life, you're gonna do your life my way or you're breaking the law. I hate saying that to 160 million people. And also, we don't need to blow up this system. We can get the 2 things we need: drive down costs dramatically and give healthcare as a right to every American, without blowing up the system and looking at those projections, which are all over the map. We can do this in a way without disrupting anything, but getting what we need. And that's what I would do. And part of it is the lower overhead in Medicare, so join the public option. The water's fine.
Hi, my name is Audrey, and this is kind of a lengthy question. I have been one that wants change in the government. I want somebody who's non-political. I've been for that for years. I thought Trump might be that person. Obviously, he's not. So what are you going to do to make me trust with your money that you're not going to get into office and do what he's done? And what are you going to do to make the world leaders believe that you're not going to do what he's done?
So, Audrey, let me say this. Mr. Trump was running on Drain the Swamp. That Washington is a corrupt cesspool and that we can't trust politicians. And it turned out that he was the biggest swamp rat that ever crawled out from under a log. Right? But if you looked at his history in business, and you looked at his series of lies and bankruptcies and misdeeds, you could see, honestly, everybody in New York knew what Donald Trump was, which was a crook. I do have a long history of actually putting together these coalitions, building grassroots, standing up for people. But I also can ask my wife, Kat Taylor here, Catherine, do you think there's any way in the world that I wouldn't be straightforward in this fight and give everything in it?
No, I don't. I'm committed, I'm taking your stand.
So I mean, really, I think this is actually the critical question, which is, look, anyone can come up with a policy. I can give you guys every policy in the books, and it could sound good. The question is, what have you done? I mean, the other thing is, you know, Kat Taylor, when she introduces me, she always says, I took the giving pledge. You know, I divested from oil and gas. We together promised to give away more than half our money while we're alive to good causes. Kat goes, you know, everybody knows that because we did that publicly. But before we got married, we said we're leaving everything on the table. Not 50% on the table. But once our kids have gone through school, that we will spend all our time and all our effort and put everything behind the idea of making this country more just. And that was almost 34 years ago. So that is the question. You know, people used to ask, does character matter in a president? My answer is, it's about the only thing that matters. Because who knows what's going to come up? Who knows what we're going to be all faced with together? And the only thing we really can judge here is try and figure out how the person's going to jump and what they're going to care about and where their heart is. So that's all I can say is, in this, we have 4 kids. You know, we feel completely committed at this point in the United States to turning the page on what I think of as a very cruel Republican regime and a very racist Republican regime.
Hi, my name is Rose Knight, and I actually live in Omaha, but lived in California for the past 30-some years.
Where in California?
San Francisco 15 years, Oakland 15 years, and Stockton for a year. So my question is, I saw all the big companies, Apple, Microsoft, Google, blah, 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 come in, push everybody out of the cities, and then the people that could work couldn't have anywhere to live, and just kept being pushed out further and further, although these companies don't generally pay taxes, which they should be, and they're not giving back in ways that they should to help the affordable housing. And meanwhile, there's thousands, as you must know, of homeless everywhere, all over California, especially in the big cities, San Francisco, Oakland, Stockton, it's
Los
phenomenal.
Angeles.
Los Angeles, you name it, they're there. So I know that doesn't affect Iowa particularly, but it does affect New York, it does affect Seattle, it does affect the West Coast. I'm wondering how and what you could do to try to, I mean, I don't know how anybody can take that many thousands of people that are on the street. I don't know what to do about that problem. I'm wondering if you have any ideas and solutions.
So Rose, just so you know, I think I'm from California, we are the center of homelessness in the United States. There are 150,000 people living on the street in California, just so you know. It's a symptom, it's the most painful and obvious symptom of what is true across the United States, including Iowa, by the way, of having millions and millions too few affordable housing units in Oakland, in Des Moines, in Los Angeles, in New York, in Charleston, in Minneapolis. And the federal government is going to have to spend hundreds of billions of dollars building units around the United States that are affordable, because I propose spending more than twice as much money on homelessness at the federal level. And that means both roofs over people's houses, but also wraparound services, including mental health, to get people off the street and back on their feet, not just with a roof, but actually participating in society again. But let me say this. We are going to have to build literally millions of affordable housing units across the country. And the federal government has walked away from that for the last 40 years, which is why we're 7 million units by my estimate back. The other thing that's true about this is we're going to have to do it in a climate smart way. That we're going to have to build the units in a way that actually allows us to have a sustainable economy and a sustainable way of living. So you can't really separate it from transportation either. So yes, is this an insolvable problem? No. This is a problem that is begging for leadership and federal money to be dedicated to it. And you working with people in localities so that in fact, when you look at housing, I mean, obviously homeless people have a very specific issue. But when you look at housing for everybody in this room and for everybody in the United States, it's at the center of inequality. Because it determines where your kids go to school, just for a starter. It determines what water comes out of your tap and what air you breathe. It determines how safe your streets are and what you can buy in the store when you go food shopping. Where you live is an incredible point about your whole life. And so it's going to be really important that we not only build units, that we do it in a climate smart way, and it's a huge part of my climate plan, is to rebuild America, including residential America, in a climate smart way. And it's also a question of, are people going to be forced out of their traditional communities as developers come in and try and build the most expensive units they can with the highest margins in the middle of the city where people have decided they want to live again. And we're going to have federal leadership and federal dollars building affordable housing. And if you look at the young people in this room, every young person is faced with a huge rent problem, a huge problem about buying houses. This is something that goes across society. Homelessness is the most obvious and painful, but this is a crisis in America that you see, really across the country, not just on the coast.
As a follow-up to that, I just want to ask, because these corporations that have come in and done what they've done, which is literally buy everything and kick everybody out, why and how can we use something to get them to contribute back? Because they're really the root of the problem.
So let me say this. I don't know if you guys saw this, but about 3 weeks ago there was a report that the 400 largest corporations in the United States pay an average of 11% tax. That is a shockingly low number. That is that is a number that is hard to believe. Amazon pays 0 tax. We're seeing an ability to evade tax by the richest, biggest, most powerful corporations in the country, and it has to end. I was saying corporations have bought the government. Look at their tax rate. Look at exactly what they're getting for what they're contributing. And so I have look, this is going to be something we're going to have to change these rules. We're going to have to take back the giveaways. We're going to have corporations contributing as well as getting benefits from the United States of America. And that's the right way, and we shouldn't be apologetic about it. That's what it's going to mean to take back the government for the people.
My name's Barb Kierhofer, and I'm from Omaha also. My concern isn't just for our country, although I'm very concerned. The whole world just seems to be struggling right now. And how will you go about trying to bring us all back together and to change some of the stuff that's going on? Every day I look in the paper and I see something about North Korea or something, and it scares me.
Well, Kat and I have a friend who is a Canadian ambassador. And she told us that the Canadian, that Canadians look at the world and they say, it's like we're playing on a team, and in the middle of the game, the captain decided to leave the field. And they don't know what to do. And so I think a world without American moral leadership is a very scary world for us and a very scary world for everybody else in the world. And so when you think about Mr. Trump's America First foreign policy, which is basically to say we have no allies, we have no coalitions, we have no values. Everything is just a negotiation, a conflict, where we try and win at other people's expense. That is a really scary world, and it doesn't work. I mean, if you think about how we've done well in the world, it's in cooperation with other freedom and democracy-loving people. And if you look at what President Obama did in negotiating with Iran, he put together a coalition of countries to negotiate with a country that we don't get along with, and everybody came out better. But there were values, there were allies, we were good for our word, everybody knew it, the Iranians knew it, and so did our allies. That is a world where we can actually prosper and things can get better. The idea that in a world, a chaotic world of America first, would lead to a better situation internationally. Look, it's preposterous. You know, obviously I started the Need to Impeach movement over 2 years ago. I know this guy's I know he's a crook. I mean, I started it because he's a crook. And I thought it was important that there be one law for everybody in the United States. And I don't know if you noticed, but apparently he retweeted that he's the second coming yesterday.
Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying. But the reason we are going to beat him so badly in 2020 is not because he's nuts or because he's a criminal. It's because he's incompetent. He is a deeply incompetent man. And the idea, this foreign policy is stupid. Really? I mean, why do we make it more complicated than it is? This is a really stupid, stupid way to think. And as a result, you know, we get bad, you do stupid things, you get bad outcomes. Yeah. That's really how we're going to beat Donald Trump. Because everybody knows he's a crook. And everybody knows he's kind of unhinged. But he's incompetent and dumb. And those are the things that Americans just can't put up with. And that's what we should go after him on. It's like, we can do so much better in cooperation with our traditional allies than we've done for 100 years, for goodness sakes, and it's worked well. That's actually my answer. My wife is laughing.
Hello, I'm Chan Chan. I have a question which I am facing now. Because my gender identity is non-binary, it means I don't want to use male or female to define myself. And I have a wide variety of gender expressions. But so at home, sometimes I like wearing a dress, a wing, and heels. And if I go outside in public and go to a restroom, I will feel embarrassed and nervous about how other people will look at me. So can you consider to plan the third room for this type of person like me? And can you tell me your plans about LGBTQ rights? Thank you.
So, let me say this. I am from San Francisco, California. So, you know, I think that the triumph of American history is our progress towards equality and accepting everybody as a complete human being. And a big part of that has been marriage equality as a step forward specifically for the LGBTQ community to say full human beings with all the rights of every other American. So in terms of gender identity, I'm aware, and I've seen the studies of how many people in our society have attitudes exactly like yours, not binary as to gender, but fluid, and not identifying strictly with one gender or the other. And so one of the things I've always thought, you know, this whole thing about transgender people, which is something where one of my friends from college, my college classmate, is the head of the largest LGBTQ organization in California. And he does a couple of big events every year, which I try to go to, and he always has a young trans person speak, someone who's around 16 to 18 years old. And I remember, 5 to 10 years ago, a young woman who was very, very sophisticated. So this was not her first gig. She was talking in front of a couple thousand people, and that was probably one of her smaller audiences. Said, half of the transgender people in the United States try to kill themselves before they're 21. So in answer to and I thought, okay, anyone whose heart does not go out to that group of people who must be in so much pain that half of them attempt suicide before 21 has got to have a heart of stone. And so my answer to you is, look, the progress and the triumph of America has been our move towards equality and justice, and to accept people fully as they are and as they see themselves, as they choose to be. And that's my answer to you in terms of gender, is we need to let people be themselves, just the way we want people to let us. And this is a huge deal in the United States. That's part of what is on the ballot in 2020, because we have a racist president whose one of his first things was the transgender ban in the military. And, but he started coming down the escalator at Trump Tower saying Latinos are murderers and rapists. I mean, here's a guy who has, as absolutely central to his politics, tried to divide and vilify Americans. And so I think it's really important that Democrats not just have a different opinion, but voice that opinion really strongly and call out the racism. Because if you let racism be said without pushing back, then it stands. And people assume that it's okay, and it's not close to it.
Hi, Tom. Chris Janicek from Omaha also. You've got a lot of Nebraskans.
There's been an invasion from Nebraska.
Listen.
Exactly.
You're right on point. Everyone in the room, go to his website and you have to donate $1, $5 to keep this man going. I mean, I met you 2 years ago in Peach Now. You did some rallies in Omaha. Yep. You motivated me to run for the United States Senate against Ben Sass in Nebraska. My question to you is, right now we are facing $1.5 trillion in student loan debt, $1.7 trillion in credit card debt. People in the room that are lucky enough to have insurance through their employers are paying over $500 billion to subsidize the insurance industry. Our country is currently spending $1 trillion on people who are underinsured or have no insurance. The stock market has been artificially inflated by the Tax Cuts and Jobs Creation Act of 2017. That's why it's hovering where it is. People are working 3 and 4 jobs at $10 an hour to make a living. At some point, this economy is going to collapse. What are you going to do, or what is your plan to prevent that from happening?
In 15 seconds or less. Look, we have an artificially propped up economy, which is Chris's point, and it's artificially propped up by these tax cuts for corporations and rich people. And there is no trickle down, so it's not being shared. But it is why the stock market's high, and it is why there's, if you have $1 trillion deficit and full employment, you can keep, an economy going in a fake way for a while, which is Mr. Trump's move. Let's talk for a second about what actual prosperity would look like in the United States. Part of it really is taking back these tax giveaways to corporations and the richest Americans. Part of it is a wealth tax. Part of it is the idea that passive investment income gets treated like earned income. So we actually have some money to invest in the American people. Because to me, and this is a question, goes to the very start of your question about student loans. When I think about a successful, prosperous country in the 21st century, I think about citizens who are productive and well-educated and living full lives to the extent of their capabilities and desires. If you look around the world and look at the countries that are rich, where people make a lot of money, and where people are progressing, they're all societies where they're invested in each other. Where if a kid from Council Bluffs gets a really good education, and becomes a really productive, successful person, that is great for the country. It's great for people in New York and Maine and Texas and California and Minnesota. And the exact same thing is true if a kid in Compton has the exact same experience. That's a prosperous country, is a group of people who are well prepared, supported to compete in the world, to live full lives, to be well paid, to be skilled workers. That's a productive country. A country that is levered up the way he levered up his casinos before they went bust is a country that may look good, but if you open the hood, you can see that there isn't the kind of engine there that really drives long-term success. And that's exactly who this guy is. Mr. Trump is a guy who bankrupts casinos. He promises a lot, he puts in fake gold faucets, he borrows a lot of money, and then he goes bankrupt. That's who we're dealing with. And for us, that's a completely different vision of success than the traditional American vision of success, which has to do with being educated, being prepared, being the hardest working people in the whole world, and then going out and having productive, competitive, successful lives that blows the world away. That's what America's done in the past. That's who we are, and that's who we're gonna be. And we're just gonna have to move away from the idea that what counts is the next week or the next month. We have to be building capability in terms of ourselves all the time, because that's how you're prosperous over a long period of time.
And this will be our final question.
Hi, Tom. Right here. Hi. My name is William, and throughout your campaign, you put.
How old are you, William?
20.
Okay, our kids are, just so you know, 26, 28, 29, 31. 20, got it.
I'll be there eventually.
Don't hurry, for God's sakes, life is good.
But you put a lot of emphasis on fixing the government, with an emphasis on the executive and legislative branch. But the Supreme Court has also received its fair share of criticism with the missing out of Merrick Garland, the appointment of Neil Gorsuch, and the appointment of Judge Kavanaugh. And a few of your Democratic primary contenders have offered solutions to a politicized Supreme Court with either term limits or establishing a code of ethics. Do you believe the Supreme Court needs to be reformed in some capacity? And if so, how would that be done?
So, William, your thesis, I agree with. The underlying idea behind your question is that the Supreme Court has been rigged by Republicans successfully. And let me say, yes, Merrick Garland is a perfect example of Mitch McConnell actually breaking the system without actually breaking the law. But it's much deeper than that, because if you look at the federal judiciary as a whole, Donald Trump has appointed a quarter of the federal judges in the United States in 3 years because Mitch McConnell wouldn't let President Obama fill vacancies on the court. It's a huge threat to our democracy. We have radical, right-wing, young judges who have been put in a rigged way by a very corrupt majority leader in the Senate, and then the most corrupt president in American history. So you're asking me, do I think we should change something? Yes. And let me say this. Look, we have to be tough about this. I mean, I would consider more than what you're saying. I mean, one of the things people have asked is, are you willing to consider more than 9 judges, which is constitutional? Yes. Look, something has gone wrong. We have 9 people who don't reflect the United States of America, who have been put up in a who've been appointed in a corrupt fashion, who are going to make decisions that affect us for 100 years in the most basic ways. So do I think that that's okay? No, that is a million miles from okay. And let me say this. What's gone on in the court is terrible. Gerrymandering, the way that it's been done, is terrible. Voter suppression and taking votes away from hundreds of thousands or millions of African Americans is beyond terrible. What we've seen in our political system is a willingness to cheat at a level with, actually calling on foreign governments to hack elections, refusing to make sure we have free and fair elections. What you're talking about is terrible, but it is just a small part of terrible. And so part of winning is going to be going back to a fair democracy. And that's part of what you're talking about in my mind. And I am determined in this. Look, if you listen to the people who want to be the Democratic nominee for president, there are people who are basically saying we need to compromise with Republicans, and here would be a perfect example. Why make waves over the fact that they've stacked the Supreme Court unethically? We have to make waves. You know, I don't understand the idea that somehow they're going to do terrible things and then we're going to compromise. That doesn't make any sense to me. We are going to have to go out and have a huge victory in 2020 by telling the truth. And then we're going to have to set the system right in a fundamental way. We're going to have to be tough-minded about it. And so the idea that somehow, through personal relationships or something, this system is going to work again with Republicans, I don't believe. I believe the way this is going to work is the American people are going to insist on a different system. That's what 2020 is going to be about. It is going to be about participation at a level that no one in this room has ever seen. Because there's so much at stake. I was joking at the beginning, I said everything's at stake, and you were teasing me saying, no kidding. I know that, but so does everybody else. And I think particularly for young people, you know, I think young people have been voting at about 1 out of 5. And I think, at least from what I can tell as someone whose organization Next Gen is the biggest organizer of young people, we are going to see participation at a record level in 2020 because we have to. Because if we don't, you guys are screwed. And you're smart and you know it. And so I think people are going to show up because they know they have to show up. And we're going to have to turn the page. This is not going to be, let's change things at the edges because it's working fine, pretty much, which would be a normal American way of thinking. We're in a different situation. It's not working at all. You know, I'm saying climate's my #1 priority. The Republican Party is working actively to make sure that climate change happens as fast as possible, which is almost inconceivable. But I would say that standing on the stage with Vladimir Putin and saying, I'm with him when he hacks American elections, is also almost inconceivable. So, let me say this. I know that was the last question. I need you guys. I really do. I need you guys in my corner on caucus night. I think we're going to leave everything on the table on this. I think everybody in this room has the exact same obligation that we do. I think that we're really under the gun as a people. And I don't think there's any way for us to turn this around without participation and people showing up. That is the way we will win. That is the only way we will win. So I'm really asking you to caucus for me, because I promise, if you do, I will do everything in my power for you. Every single day. There will be no day where I wonder who I'm in for. Okay? Thank you very much.